This is a tutorial on how to loom knit a horse. I would say this is mostly doing the wrap and turn technique and some decreasing. You're going to need a 12 peg loom and a 24 peg loom. And using your 24 peg loom, go ahead and do a drawstring cast on. You're going to be working flat, and you're going to go ahead and knit 24. This is what we're going to start with. You want to use a bulky yarn, and so we've just knitted 2 rows, and you see that it's flat. And you'll want a bulky yarn, anywhere from a 5 to a 6, and I'm using a fluffy fur yarn. So what you want to do is go ahead and knit 23 and then stop. I'm fixing to do a technique that I've done several times in the past. It's a form of shaping. It adds curve in an area you might want. And so since I've shown this so many times, I'm not going to go completely through it, particularly since I've done it on the goat recently. But I do it a lot with this pattern. So once you reach that, you want to wrap and turn the next peg, and then you'll knit 22 all the way back just before the last peg. So wrap and turn, and then knit all the way around until you get to the last peg. And we're doing a wrap and turn technique for the back of the head. Again, I've done this several times in several videos, so you kind of have a general idea of how I'm going about this. Pretty much if you've made socks, you can do this pattern. And I'm doing a flat knit. You can E-wrap this whole thing. It'll just be bigger. You might as well double the size. Go ahead and wrap and turn and knit 21. You can E-wrap the whole thing if you want, or you can flat knit. I'm flat knitting because I wanted it smaller. But you want to continue this wrap and turn process all the way down until you have 10 single loops that are placed in between the wrap and turns. So go ahead and complete the video, complete this section, and go ahead and pause, and then we'll go from there. So this area is where you should have your single loops, with only 1 loop, and their back should have 2 loops. I'll show you what your loom should look like when you're done. This is what your loom should look like. This is what your bottom should be completed. And you should have 2 loops there. And then you should be able to count 10 loops. And then 2 loops all the way back to your other end. And this is what your pegs should look like. This is what your loom should look like. Now what we're going to do, because we've reached the peak of the head, we're going to start working in the ears in the 10 single pegs. And you want to knit the first one. So go ahead and knit the first single looped peg. And now we're going to work with the next 4 pegs on our first ear. And what you want to do is you want to knit 4 for 7 rows. And the ears are going to go a little different than I normally do, because the point of the ears on horses tend to be close together rather than center. So you'll kind of see how I go about this. Again, you can E-wrap this whole animal if you'd like, rather than knitting. I'm doing a flat knit. And if you have a question as to how to go about not having as tight of a knit, I barely hold the working yarn over the pegs, and when I toss the bottom loop over, I pull back a lot of times. So right when I pull back and over, I pull it back and it pulls more of a loop out, and that's how I generally keep my loops from getting too tight, is pulling up and back where the working yarn gets looser. And so that's a suggestion. I've had a lot of questions as how to keep it from getting tight. That's my suggestion for it. Now, using the two, there's your 4, you're going to use the 2 outer ones, and it's going to be those 2. So there's your 2 to the left side. So go ahead and knit 2 for 4 rows. This is the point of your ear. At this point, you'll want to change the color if you want a pink inner ear. I didn't think it really mattered, but if you want a pink inner ear, at this point, change the color. Now go ahead and knit 4 for 6 rows. This pattern you can do pretty versatile with colorations if you want to change. Again, this is the ears, and I'll kind of give you a guideline of where we're at in things and what sections are what, so that you know generally when to change your colors. Now you'll have completed an ear, and what you want to do, this is optional, you want to skip this part, you don't like it, you can skip it, you can just sew up the ears later, but I like to bring my original loops back on and then toss bottom loops over, and that way if I don't feel like sewing the ears up, I don't have to. But if you don't feel comfortable with this and you're afraid you might screw up the head so far, by doing this, don't bother, you can skip it. All you'll need to do is when you're done with the head, you'll need to sew the ears up and close that off. And toss the bottom loops over. Now we're going to work the next 4 pegs, and we're going to be working the other ear. And when you pull it, it'll be easier to see if you're E-wrapping rather than knitting. If you pull it, you can see that the point is on one side. Well, you're going to repeat what we just did, but you're going to make sure the points are going to be right beside each other. And so you're going to work the next 4, and you're going to E-wrap and you're going to knit 4 for 6 rows. I'm sorry, I tend to do this at like 1 in the morning. Okay, so you're going to follow this pretty much the way we just did the first one. The row number is going to kind of be flip-flopped. You're going to do 6 rather than 7 because you want to be able to get on the inner side to do the points of the ears. Now that we've done that, we're going to do the inner points of our ears, and they're going to be on the outer edge, but you want to make sure they're lined up with the 2 point that we did on the previous ear. So there's your point from the previous ear. We want to make sure that that lines up right beside it, so we're doing the 2 pegs for 4 rows. Now you want to knit 4 for 7 rows. Which I'm going to kind of speed up. Okay, you can skip this part again if you don't feel comfortable with it, but put the original loops back on if you'd like. If you're like me and don't like sewing up a whole bunch of stuff, you'll just do this and keep from having to sew the ear up, so you can just put the original loops back on. Again, this is optional, you don't have to do it. And toss your bottom loop saver. And you've completed your second ear. At this point we're going to start working our way down to the front section of the head and working our way down to the snout area. Now you want to knit 2, and in that knitting 2 you're going to include 1 wrap and turn. At this point we're going to start adding our wrap and turns back on, so go ahead and knit 12. Because this yarn's slick, sometimes I have to do this. Okay, and that includes the next wrap and turn. Now you're going to go in and you're going to E-wrap 13, then you're going to you're going to knit 13, then knit 14, and so forth until you're back to your original starting point. So what you're doing is adding in the wrap and turn with each back and forth row that you do until you have no more wrap and turns left. and add another wrap and turn. And you want to continue this process until you have no more wrap and turns. So each row remove until you're back to your starting point, and then go from there. So go ahead and pause the video to complete this step. After that, you'll want to just go ahead and knit 24 pegs for 3 straight rows. And this is what you should have. And you see the back of the head, and you see the point in the ears. You see where the ears are, and you see the front of the head and the 3 rows that you've done. Now we're going to decrease by 5 pegs on each side, and we're creating an indentation in the lower part of the head area. And what I'm planning on doing is just lifting up 9 pegs on my hook, because with the flat knit it's a little too difficult to try to just place every other loop over to the next peg. So once you pick up 9, place that last loop on the next peg, and then thereafter you want to place 2 loops on each peg. And this puts a nice indentation into the head where the horse's face indents in. And I actually tried to use actual photos of real horses to kind of give me a guide on this. And what you want to do is, you see that you've decreased by 5, and there's how many that you have with 2 loops on them. And you're going to repeat the exact same thing on the other side. You're going to lift up 9 loops and then place 2 on each peg. And on that 9th loop, you want to place that on the next peg with a loop on it. And then go ahead and place 2 loops on each peg. Some yarns are easier to work with than others on this kind of a step, because this is so slick with the plastic pegs. It makes it a little bit of a challenge. Okay, now you have 5 empty pegs now, and then you have 2 loops there. At this point, you want to knit 14 pegs, tossing both those loops over the top on those decreased pegs. Okay, now that we've done that, we're going to do some just straight out rows of knitting. But you now have an indentation where that nice curve is. So now you want to knit 14 for 4 rows. Pause the video to go ahead and complete. This is what you should have so far. And what we're going to do is we're going to create nostrils, because I find they're very predominant when looking at an actual photograph. So start off by knitting 4. Then you're going to knit 2 for 5 rows. So we're going to knit these 2 for 5 rows. And this creates a nostril. And then you want to knit 2, and then you want to do your next nostril. So then you'll knit 2 for 5 rows, and that'll give you your second nostril. And then you want to knit 4, and you're back at your other end. At this point, go ahead and knit 2 rows and then cast off. So go ahead and pause the video. And here's what you should have. And what you're going to do is you're going to sew up the nose and the snout area. And if you didn't bring the original loops back, you'll need to sew up your ears. But I'm going to show you how I'm going to sew up the mouth area. I'm actually going to put it flat and sew it up that way. So I'm not doing my usual drawstring cast off. I'm actually sewing up the end so that you have more of a distinctive mouth area. Because the mouth area on the horse to me was very distinct when looking at photographs. So I wanted to do it this way. And then at this point, you just sew up the bottom until you get to your original cast on. So you sew up all the way up to here, and you'll see there's an edge there. You want to sew all the way up to that edge, so you'll sew all the way up to there. And then you'll want to stuff your head, and the head is done. Now we want to start on the body, and you want to do a drawstring cast on of 24 pegs, and then you want to knit 24 for 5 rows, purl 1 row, and then knit 10 rows. So there's your 5, there's your purl, and here's your 10 rows. And that's the body. Now we're going to create the chest area that comes out. And what we're going to do is we're going to knit 10, and then we're going to do the wrap and turn concept again so that we can get a nice chest, distinctive chest area like a horse has. Okay, so you're going to skip the next peg, and we're going to start working this flat. So skip the next peg and pick up that loop and put it onto the previous peg that you just skipped. And the reason we're doing this is we want the neck area to start to slowly get smaller in the back, because when you look at an actual photograph of a horse, the neck area is fatter at the base and thinner at the actual base of the head. So now you're going to knit 21 pegs, and we're starting to work flat rather than circularly at this point. Okay, so you're going to skip your next peg, and you're going to move that last loop over one, decreasing, and then you're going to knit them together like you did on the other side. Okay, at this point we're working flat, but we're also fixing to start our wrap and turn section. So go ahead and knit 16. We're going to create our first part of the chest area that protrudes on a horse's body. Okay. After you've done 16 knits, we're going to wrap and turn the next peg, and then you're going to knit 10. Wrap and turn the next peg, and then knit 9. And so we're going to continue this wrap and turn until we're going to be down to 6 pegs with single loops in between wrap and turn pegs. So wrap and turn, and then knit 8. And so you continue this wrap and turn process until you get down to 6 single loops between the wraps. So 6 single loops. Pause the video to complete, and I'll show you what your loom should look like. Okay, so there's your 3 2 loops. Here's your 6 single loops, and there's your 3 2 loops, which are your wrap and turns. And that is what your loom should look like. Now we're going to slowly start adding those wrap and turn loops back on, those pegs back on. So start by knitting 7. Then you'll want to knit 8. And then you'll want to knit 9, and then 10, and then 11. And so you keep going back and forth, adding a wrap and turn row until you get all the way back to the end. So go ahead and pause to complete. Now that you've done that, you've created your first curve. So now what we want to do is we want to decrease by 1 on each end. And if you ever see my patterns written out, you'll see decrease 1, knit 1 right beside each other, or decrease 1, E-wrap 1. This is what I'm talking about. You decrease it, then you knit or E-wrap it. So go ahead and knit 20. And we're going to be decreasing slowly rather than quickly like we did with the goat, because we want a gradual decrease there rather than a solid one. So instead of the neck going directly up, we want it to angle out a little bit. And then you want to knit 16. And basically you're going in and you're doing a decrease on each end, and then you're knitting a straight row. The horse is quite a challenge because of where all the curves are. So wrap and turn the next peg, and then knit 10. I'm sorry, we're doing another wrap and turn section. I'm actually really tired. So wrap and turn, and then knit 9. And then you're going to do exactly what we just did with the previous wrap and turn the second time around, and then slowly add the wrap and turns back in. So go ahead and pause the video and continue this wrap and turn section. You're repeating just what we did, so if you need to, go back in the video when I started the wrap and turn and follow it from there. But you're going to do that all the way up until you get back to your starting point. So go ahead and pause to complete, and we'll go from there. You've just completed your second wrap and turn section and added all the loops back in, and you now have your chest area. At this point we'll be completing our neck area, so go ahead and decrease by 1 on each end. Then you want to knit 18. want to just knit 18. Again, this is where I was talking about where you decrease and then you knit a straight row. I'm going to kind of speed this up. Okay, then you want to decrease by 1 on each end again. Then you want to knit 16. Then knit a straight row, just a 16, and I'll speed that up. Let's go ahead and just knit a straight row. Okay, go ahead and decrease by 1 on each end. And then you'll want to knit 14. At this point, go ahead and knit 14 for 2 rows and then cast off. So just knit 2 straight rows of 14, cast off, and go ahead and pause to complete. Now that you've done that, what we're going to do is we're going to sew up our neck area, and then you'll want to close up your back end area and stuff, but I'm going to show you how to close up your neck area. And what you want to do is you want to sew down through here, and while you see a heavy indentation, that's okay. Your main is actually going to be filled in that section. And so you'll never see it. In fact, it's a perfect guideline where to add your main at, so, and where to stop. So this section we're sewing up, you're not even going to see the seam. And you want to go ahead and close up the back end, and then you want to stuff it. Next, you'll want to go to the legs, and we're going to do the front. I'm going to kind of tell you how to do the front legs, and then I'll show you how to do the back legs. So the front legs are really standard and straightforward. You start off with your black or whatever your hoof color is. Go ahead and drawstring cast on 12 pegs, and then you knit 2 rows, purl 1 row, and then knit 2 rows. Change your color, and then knit 12 for 14 rows, and then you want to cast off. You'll want to make 2 of those. And you can make 4 if you don't want to do the curve in the back leg like this. You can just make 4 of these if you want. But I'm going to show how you do the curve in the back leg, but you start off doing the same thing. Drawstring cast on, knit 2, purl 1, knit 2, and then do 7 rows before you start your heel to do that bend area in the leg. So let me show you how to do that after you've gone in and done the basics. What you want to do is you want to knit 6, and we're basically creating a heel area like you would on a sock. We're doing the wrap and turn technique. That is mostly what shows up in this pattern, is a heavy wrap and turn. So go ahead and knit 6, wrap and turn, and then knit 5. Wrap and turn, and then you want to knit 4. We're doing this all the way down to 2 pegs with single loop on them. So knit 4, wrap and turn, and knit 3, wrap and turn, and knit 2, wrap and turn, and knit 2 again. And we finished the wrap and turn section. Now you want to start adding your wrap and turns back on. So you knit 3, then you knit 4, and then you knit 5, and so on, and then until you get back to your starting point again. And this is how you create the nice bend in the back legs. Again, you don't have to do this. You could just do 4 straight legs if you choose, and if you don't feel comfortable with this. Okay, and now you want to go all the way around. Okay, now you want to continue circularly for 7 more rows, and you want to cast off, and then you'll want to make 2, and you'll want to stuff those. Naturally, you'll want to close in the hoof area, and so do 7 more rows, cast off, stuff, make 2, and close off the bottoms, and those are your legs. Now we want to go to assembling and adding the final touches to your horse. And the first thing I always like to do is sew my head on first. And naturally you want to line up the back of the head with the back of the body. And you want to line that up down the center. And then the next thing you'll want to do is, this is a preference, but I like the horse looking down. And so I'm going to actually go in and tack the head down. As you can see, if you tack the head down, it looks even more horse-like. It has more of that curvature that you look for with a horse head. And then to sew on your legs, you want to find your 6 columns that don't have a wrap and turn, and you want to go to the base, and you want to start at that base and sew back on your front leg. Then you want to follow that line, and you want to sew the back leg starting from the purled line all the way forward, keeping on that line. You want to do the same thing on the other side. Find the base of the other side of the 6 columns, and you repeat the same thing. Now, what we want to do is we want to attach our main, and you want to find your main color. And what I'm going to do is wrap the yarn, like wrapping rope, up around my elbow and up towards my palm. I'm going to do that like 15-20 times. And this creates a nice long strand that's perfect for the size you need. And after you do that, you want to cut the strips. So cut your loops on each end so that you have several strips. So cut that in, and then you want to find your loops on the other end and cut it. And these will be your strips to do your mane and tail. And attaching everything is actually really easy. So take a single strand, you'll want to fold it in half, and then you want to take your crochet hook, and then you want to find that center mark. And in between those 2 columns, there tends to be the connecting loops. Well, what you're going to do is you're going to follow those connecting loops back and attach a strand at a time, one back from the next attaching loop. And so you want to continue doing that, and that actually helps you keep a solid straight line for the mane. So following that same column area, go to the next connecting loop of the 2 columns and pull through, wrap, and pull through the loop. Pull all the way through and tighten. You can use a latch hook for this if you're comfortable using a latch hook, but this is how I'm keeping it straight all the way down. It gets complicated once you reach the body, but there is a line that you can follow to continue attaching the mane. So pull that through and tighten. And you want to continue that all the way down the back of the head and down to the spine, down the neck, where your seam is on the body, and that'll hide that. Then if you want it to look fuller, go in and separate the strands like this, like I used a bulky yarn. It's easy to separate some strands and give it a wavy, more hair-like effect to have a really pretty mane for your horse. So if you want a fuller mane, go ahead and separate the strands on all of them. You'll want to follow that all the way down. Now what you want to do is you want to find the center purl in the back, and you want to follow 3 purls from that center. So there's the center purl and the 2 beside it. And you want to weave in 4 strands on each purl. So there is my center, as you can see. And I'm going to work 1 purl on one side of it and another purl on the other side, and I'm going to add 4 strands to each of the purls. And this will give you your tail. So there's 2 strands on that middle one, and then I'll want to add 2 more, and then work with the next purl beside it. This gives you a nice full tail. It's a wonderful thing about the purled line. It's a great guide to where to sew things and add things and that kind of thing. So go ahead, and I'm working the next one over, the next purl over. And I want to add 4 to to this one. And then you go to the other side of that other purl and add to it. And you can do the same thing, make the tail fuller by separating the strands in the bulky yarn. So go ahead and do that. And then when you want to add your eyes, you want to find the outer edge of the ear and follow it down to the base where you've done the decrease, and you go a little up from there and glue your eyes on. And I chose to do melted down pony beads, but after that you're done, and this is what it should look like. And as you can tell, you don't see the neck area of the body because the mane hides it, but you can adjust everything. As you can see, there's the head attached without the mane, so you see what it looks like. And that's it. You're done.